Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, your child librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to be looking at the film, The Great Debaters. So this stars, obviously, Denzel Washington on the front here. It's also directed by him, and it's produced by Oprah. Why is this important? Because this is one of those supposedly based on a true story, and they kind of screw it up. And as opposed to the other Denzel Washington film that we did this month, which is Remember the Titans, which again stars Denzel Washington. That was produced by Disney, so they're screwing up as Disney. This was produced by Oprah. There's less of an excuse of African Americans screwing up their own history. So we will get to that when we'll talk about the story. First, it's a very, very good film, 13 plus on this one, just because it talks about a historically black college in the 1930s in Texas. So this is the Jim Crow South, and it touches on some of the problems going on in the South in the 1930s prior to, the massive civil rights movement. And, it gets dark and real. But again, it gets dark, so definitely 13 plus. You don't want to be showing this to their little kids. There's a showing of a lynching and a black man being set on fire in this film. So, and there's a mild sex scene in here. So yes, definitely 13 plus. So I'm going to briefly look at it again. I've seen this film like twice and I just rewatched it. So my brain doesn't know it exactly. So the film, The Great Debaters, is about a debate team at Wiley College, which is a real place. It's a historically black or African American college. It's a private school in Marshall, Texas. So the events of this film take place in 1935. So middle of the Great Depression in the deep South. It's very much the Jim Crow South. So lynchings are common, which is not fun. So the story tells of the main characters here. You have the professor, which is Melvin B. Tollison, a real person. This is played by Denzel Washington. Highly intelligent man. He's a poet. He's a professor. He does a bunch of other stuff. It focuses on the film where he's the coach of the debate team. The other thing that shows what he's doing is he's involved with unionizing the basically the why on earth can I not think of the word? The people who are doing crop sharing, which are notoriously poor. And the best way I can describe it, because my background is medieval history, is serfdom in the 1930s. Essentially, these people are evidently why they can technically leave. They're very much tied to the land. It went from slavery to serfdom, essentially. They are not owned anymore, but they're kept notoriously poor, badly treated, and their life just kind of sucks, and they're getting tied to the land here. And he's trying to unionize them so they have more power. And obviously the white landowners and the rest of a lot of the white people are not happy with this. It does show that, and this is true, he had a radical left leanings. I don't know if it actually, from my research, says he was actually supporting communism, but it wasn't the type of communism you had in Russia. He was supporting workers' rights, essentially, is what he was doing. So, in the film, you have Melvin Tollison. He forms this, basically, you have a debate team where he has massive tryouts with a bunch of people. This is it's an elite private school, historically black. So you have to pay to go in here. So it's a 4-person team. He has tryouts. And you have the 2 debaters, and then you have the 2 alternates. So in the film, you have Denzel Washington. He's the coach. You have a character by the name of Henry Lowe. He's chosen as one of the 2 debaters. And then you have Hamilton Burgess, who's the other one. And then the two alternates are a character by the name of Samantha Brooke and then James L. Farmer Jr. Now, of those 4 debaters, only one is a real person. So, and we will kind of get to that. But again, you have these 4 debaters. James L. Farmer Jr. at the time was about 14 years old. This is true. As I said, he's the real character besides Tolleson. And then you also have Forrest Whitaker, who plays his father, which is James L. Farmer Jr., who is a minister as well as a professor at this historically black school. I think it was connected to the Methodist Church. Yeah, it was the Methodist Episcopal Church of this, basically Bishop Isaac Wiley, which is where it was named. It was certified in 1882. So, but it's still a small school. Okay, so it goes through this small school winning debates against higher ranking African American colleges, which are Howard, I believe, is one of the ones they mention here, which I've heard of, as well as let's see, naming other colleges. Basically, they go through basically winning all their debates against these much larger, much better funded exclusively African American colleges and universities, and they're this small little school. Now, throughout the film, the debate topics are always very on point to the time period. They're talking about civil rights and poverty, because again, this is taking place in 1935, so the Great Depression is very much a thing. I do not believe in the U.S., at least in the common people, that they realized the World War II was on the horizon, because this is 1935. Hitler had just taken over Germany a couple of years ago, and then the invasion of Poland was still a couple of years off. So enriched in basically civil rights and the Great Depression and Roosevelt. So then they go through a variety of things. They see this on their way to a debate. A large group of white people, men, women, and children, having strung up a black man and set him on fire. There's an incident between our two characters, James L. Farmer Sr. and Jr., with his James's wife and I think their other young children, where they accidentally hit a poor white farmer's pig and they're forced to pay $25. And it very much dehumanizes Farmer's character. This is a highly educated minister. Had he not been black and dealing with a white person, the pig wouldn't cost that much. And then there's incidents where they're dealing with Tolleson's left leanings. One of the characters, Hamilton Burgess, leaves the team because his father doesn't want him on a team with Tolleson, because Tolleson will not deny that he's a communist. So, and this is before what we would consider the Red Scare back in the late 40s and 50s, into the, into the like 60s. Massive Red Scare. But communism, you're obviously understand during World War I, that's when you had the communism took over of Russia and the killing of their royal family kind of thing. So they do not like communists, even though we befriend Russia during World War II. But again, this is 1935. But still, and so Hamilton Burgess leads the team, leading the way for the character of Samantha Brooke to basically take his spot. Now, the other thing that to note that during this film, Melvin Tolleson writes their notes for their debates. So he writes their points and what they read off during the debate. and they do all the research. So they know what they're talking about, but he's the one who writes them. So the big climax of this film is they've, I think, only lost one debate. And this was after they saw the whole lynching thing. So they were kind of in shock. So they do basically a major debate after being invited to Harvard. Now, both Melvin Tolleson as well as the character of Henry Lowe have written to Harvard trying to get them to debate. They've already debated the University of Oklahoma and won. So, and this was filmed, they did it, apparently the debate was held off campus. So they go to Boston and debate Harvard. This is when you find out where apparently Harvard finds out that their professor, who's not with them, has been writing their, basically their debate notes. So basically they say, we're going to switch the topic, and both teams are going to have the same amount of time to do it themselves. So they end up having to do this. The other thing is that Henry Lowe's character defers to and steps down and allows that James Farmer, the junior alternate, to take his place. And so it's him and Samantha Brooke that do the actual debating. And if I remember correctly, the topic, being very, very on point, has to do with civil disobedience. So they ended up winning this massive debate against Harvard. And that is the conclusion. And they have some explaining at the end of what happened with Tolleson, how James L. Farmer Jr. became a big civil rights leader. It talks about Henry Lowe's character going off and becoming a minister in California, and then Samantha Brooke becoming being part of the civil rights movement and becoming a lawyer. Okay, so this is an absolutely utterly fantastic film. It's very well done. It's an underdog story. It's very inspiring. It does show some of the issues going on in the Jim Crow South, particularly, say, in Texas during the 1930s, where despite having these very well-educated, extremely intelligent African Americans, they still have to defer to whites, no matter how, and that's really in the case of the stupid pig farmer, poor and stupid they are. And then it does show, I mean, the lynching, how these people they're still living in fear. And at one point in time, Tolleson is arrested for rabble-rousing. Essentially, he's trying to get both the blacks and the white sharecroppers, the terminology there, to unionize, and he's arrested for that. And James Farmer Jr. has to help get him out in order to basically convince the sheriff, it's like, you don't want a giant riot here. So a lot of these incidences are very true to the time. The attitudes and clothing are on point for time periods. Okay, so here comes the issues. So why Melvin Tolleson obviously did exist. As far as I can tell from my research, he was not arrested during this time period. He in all the research I can see is he was considered having left-leaning, rather than being told he was an outright communist. He went on to do a variety of stuff. He taught at the school. He did a lot of things, to teaching drama, to being, I think he was coaching the football team at this college. He went on to a couple of other different colleges. He was a great poet and very well known. And yes, he was involved with the sharecroppers. The other character, James L. Farmer Jr., was 14. He was part of this debate team. He did graduate. He is very well known in the civil rights movement. He was one of the people who started with the ideas of doing those freedom rides, and he was part of most of them. The first one, he had to leave before they got to Alabama because his father had died. so he had to leave. He was part of some of the other ones, so he was considered one of the big five during the civil rights movement. So, major actual real character. Okay, now we're going into the other problems. So I went into a little bit. Henry Lowe did not exist. The real person, let me pull down this. This is an article by one of the other debaters' grandchildren. I believe they changed the name here. Yeah, the actual person's name was Henry Height. And then Hamilton Boswell was the actual character. And as far as I can tell, he was on that debate team, and he did not leave. The other thing is the character of Samantha Brooke is fictionalized. There was no female on the team in 1935. She's loosely based on a woman by the name of Henrietta Bell Wells, who was the first member on the debate team at Wiley College in Texas. But she was only on there for a year. I think it was in 1930. She had to leave because she was the daughter of a single mother, and she had to work. So I believe she was on the team in 1930. Yeah. So she was on the team in 1930 when they debated the law school at the University of Michigan. So she was part of some of that, but she wasn't part of the 35 team. She ended up getting married to an Episcopalian minister, and then went into social work and was a teacher, and was apparently part of creating a church in Gary, Indiana, which probably is abandoned by this point. Who knows? It's Gary, Indiana. So, and then she served as the Dean of Women at Dillard University in New Orleans, and she died in 2008. So that's the other thing. She obviously was not a real person. And it was actually Henry Boswell who went to the University of Southern California and became a minister. And there's the other kicker. They didn't debate Harvard. That wasn't the top reigning school at the time. It was the University of Southern California. So they didn't go north to Boston. They went west. And officially they did not, because they couldn't be part of the National Debate Society because they were a black school, it wasn't official. Even though, yes, they technically did beat the University of Southern California in 1935. So those were the big things. There's an article here, I don't know where it is. It's in blacknewsvoices.com. That's where I'm finding it. It was basically, it's commentary by a woman by the name of Eleanor Boswell Rain. So she was the granddaughter of Hamilton Boswell, who was he was actually on the team, and he went to the University of Southern California, which makes kind of a little bit more sense on the fact that this was the school they actually debated. So, and he was an advisor for the film. He died before they started filming, so he had no idea they changed his name and screwed a bunch of stuff up. But he was the one who described the hanging incident, and I think some of his other memories of the university. The woman who was, doing far too many, Harriet Bell Wells was also involved a little bit as an advisor, because she died in 2008, and this film came out, I think, in 2007. So she would have been aware of what was going on. But again, she wasn't actually part of the 35 team. She was there in 1930. So she was probably aware that they were going to do some fictionalizing things. So, and then he died. When did Boswell die? I'm pulling up here. Let's see. He died in, scrolling down this article. I will link this article. He died before the film came out. So, but obviously the granddaughter is ranting about why on earth the name was changed, and her grandfather, essentially his belief that this was going to be more accurate was not true. The other thing this article mentions, and is mentioned, Denzel Washington in his big speeches that happen to be really, really weird. During a kind of debate between him and the character of, jumping back, because again, I haven't seen this, of Henry Lowe. He describes the origin of the word lynching, which is a myth that didn't come about until a couple decades after these events. So, one, it's a myth, and two, these people wouldn't have known about it. Apparently, the Southern people bringing in this well-known, plantation owner from the Caribbean to terrorize and beat the crap out of their black slaves to make them behave. Complete myth, again, didn't really pop up into popular culture until decades after these events would have happened. So again, that's Denzel Washington's big speech in this film. So yeah, both this and Remember the Titans, his big speech, it doesn't hold water. So, but those were the issues in the film. And I'm not sure whether this is worse or better than Remember the Titans. Remember the Titans at least got people's names right, but they screwed a whole bunch of other stuff up. And this one has less of an excuse. It was most definitely an underdog story. This is still a very small school in Texas. I'll bring this up. Wells. It's mentally, I'm mispronouncing. It's Wiley College, Wellesley. Really different school. Sorry about that. Wiley College. So that's the college of it. It's still relatively small from what I can tell. Yeah, really small. It's 450. Is the on-campus enrollment between 2005 and 2006. So that's a small school, and it looks like they have a off-campus program in Louisiana. So that enrolled about 250. So yeah. Looks like enrollment went up, and in fall of 2003 they had about 1,400 students. So, and then I do know that I'm humming too much in this video. Denzel Washington donated money for them to restart their debate team. So apparently they had stopped their debate team at one point in time. So that is mostly it. I mean, yes, James Farmer he did go to the school. He was, and this is saying, I keep seeing Big 4, Big 5, Big 6. This is saying he was one of the top people in the civil rights movement. To that, he was one of the first. He helped organize the first sit-ins and the freedom rides in the United States. So, and yes, yeah, he really was that young. So, and let's see. Apparently, the film was sparked by an article by Tony Sherman about Wiley College debate team for the 1997 spring issue. So, and then they want to kind of inspire things here. So that's really it for this video. This is a really, really great film. Highly recommend it. Just be aware of the inaccuracies. I definitely, when it comes to these things, Remember the Titans pissed me off just because it screwed up a lot of bigger issues. This one changed names and moved things around a little bit. But it gets to the heart of the issue, and it doesn't misbetray. This really was a underdog story for this debate team because it's a very, very small school. And there was a lot of issues in 1935. So, but it's a great feel-good movie. I even looked on Common Sense Media, which is one of the common places you can check what they're judging as. It's definitely 13 plus because you had that lynching scene. Samantha and Henry have a mild sex scene in this, but initially they're adults. So, and again, there's implications of violence because this is the Jim Crow South in 1935. But it is a great film to show if you're looking at civil rights history, looking at some of these very major characters. Both Tolson and Farmer were major influences, and obviously Palmer was one of the big people involved in the civil rights movement. So it's a great film to show to your 13 and up. It is good to look at how the history was screwed just a little bit, so you can look into that. But it's a good film to show. Denzel Washington is a fantastic actor. I think I still have one more film I'm planning to do on him. That's South African civil rights, which is a completely different animal. But that's to come some months down the road here. That would be Cry Freedom. So that's the other one. I think that's at least more accurate and a bit older than both the previous, both Remember This Film and Remember the Titans. So that was filmed in like 87. These are further on in history. So fantastic film. Highly recommend it. History is a little screwed up. So it's definitely dramatized. I can see why they put the female on there to appeal to modern audiences. The name changing, not as much of an excuse. There might be a money thing going on there. And again, they don't have the other excuse because with Titans, which has Disney, Denzel Washington was the director. Oprah funded the thing. So, but great film. Again, recommend. I have an anniversary edition. I borrowed this from my library. So there's a lot of information on here. Definitely 13 plus because of those mature audiences. So that is it for this review. If you like what you see, be sure to check out the rest of what I've got. In this month of February, I have a lot of both Black history as well as Asian history because it's Chinese New Year. This is a month where I have some more of my heavier topics because I also cover the color purple in here and the Joy Luck Club, which are more advanced audience. Otherwise, I do a lot of children's picture books, a lot of more family films. I've done a lot more stuff. I have a lot more plans, so be sure to like and subscribe and see what I've got. If you're looking besides the book reviews, I also have a few secular homeschooling videos and a few travel videos, as well as some other kind of educational stuff that's sprinkled here or there. So, thank you.